for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you so much. Could we have the roll call, please? Andrea?
Yes. Chair Sinks,
Here.
Vice Chair Rennie,
Here?
Director Bruins, Director Corrigan, here. Director Craig, here. Director Tate, here. Director Abikoga, here. Director Miller,
Here.
Alternate Director Smith, here. Director Gibbons, here. Director Harney.
Present. Could you turn that light down just a little bit? It's shining right in my eyes.
This is for video purposes, so you show up fabulously on television.
Yeah, and I'll just note that.
And you can tweet about it
the
after the
eyeball over here, too.
I'll note that Director Cortese is absent.
I was here for 5 hours last night under the same lighting, so I'm sure you can. That's right. Okay. Well, I would like to welcome new directors or alternates that we have. Nancy Smith from Sunnyvale, welcome to you. Jim Griffith is going to continue as the primary, and you're the alternate from Sunnyvale. Thank you. And on this side, we have Courtney Corrigan from Los Altos Hills. Welcome.
Thank you.
We said goodbye to John Harpootlian at the end of last year, but thank you so much for your service.
I'm excited to do it, and I'm very happy to have an alternate here tonight as well, Steve Schmidt from the town of Los Altos Hills.
Thank you, Steve. Welcome. And Margaret Abikoga, representing Mountain View this year on the board. Welcome to you, too. Yeah. Anybody have anything important to say about that? No? Well, we're delighted to have you join this board in the year where we will be initiating service. And as many of you know, and you'll see in the reports, we've already put out tens of thousands of notices, and our opt-out rate is nothing less than stellar. I was calculating it in the tenths of a percent, I think. So it's a testament to all the hard work of the board last year, and we're looking forward to a great year this year with those of you who are new. With that, I'd like to see if there's any public comment this evening. I have one card that looks like it may not be on an agendized item from Richard Foucher. Would you like to speak at this time? And if there's anybody else who wants to speak on oral communication, please bring a card up and give it to the clerk here, Andrea, and she'll get it up here and we'll make sure that you're heard. And this is on items not on the agenda this evening. Thank you. Go ahead, sir.
Good evening. My name's Richard Fancher, and I'm from Los Altos. Last week, I got your notification of automatic enrollment in Green Start, and it says in big globe print that jumps out, 100% carbon-free electricity at lower rates than PG&E. It sounds too good to be true. And for me, it's not true. I'm a PG&E Smart Rate customer. Last year, Smart Rate reduced my rate for electricity 9 times more than Green Start will. So much for electricity at lower rates than PG&E. This is a misrepresentation and probably consumer fraud. You have not been transparent in your impacts on me, and that has significantly damaged my trust in you. Smart Rate is a peak day time of use add-on for residential customers. PG&E activates it on hot summer days, about a dozen a year. Your rate schedule addresses all the various different kinds of PG&E time of use rates except Smart Rate. Your residential rates and comparison sheet shows Green Start saving money compared to PG&E rates for all the rates you choose to show. But you chose to ignore the time of use rate that has the most customers in PG&E. That's Smart Rate, which saves me quite a bit compared to Green Start. This is lying by omission. You have misrepresented results and lied by omission. As such, you have misinformed current and potential smart rate customers about your rollout. I imagine you have honorable intentions in helping roll out Silicon Valley green energy. Why else would you be here? Please stop the misrepresentation and the lying by omission. Trust is priceless and difficult to replace.
Thank you very much. We will direct staff to prepare a summary and explain this for the benefit of the board and the public. So next I have Mark Thelke. For the record, can you give us your name, because I'm not sure I'm
Yeah,
pronouncing
no
it.
problem. My handwriting is a little sloppy. It's
Great.
Mark Tholke, T as in Tom, Holke.
Thank you.
So the reason why I came, and I'll be brief, is I'm a renewable energy developer and have been for over 10 years. I've generally focused on utility scale renewable energy projects, and I've recently become interested in local in-county solar PV. I think this is something that can be done. I understand there is some cost pressures, to the gentleman that preceded me's point. But I think with some hard work, this can be done cost effectively, and in particular, to the extent there are county lands that are either high visibility or somehow underused, we can site solar PV inside the county of Santa Clara. Even though the property values are so high, solar PV does not compete with residential or commercial office space, of course. But to the extent that we can emphasize, collectively, we can emphasize the importance of local solar PV infrastructure, I think this can be done. So I have a couple brochures I'd like to leave with staff, if that's okay.
Thank you, of course.
Thank you.
Are there any more speakers on oral communication this evening? If not, we'll move to the consent calendar.
Chair, I have one just clerical correction on the consent calendar, item 1C, which
Yes.
is the contract with the mayor accountancy. And on section 3 of the agreement, there was just an omission of an exhibit. And on the end of the first line, when it refers to the total amount of compensation of $103,500, it should say as provided in Exhibit B, which is attached here to and incorporated herein by this reference. And that would be the addition made there, just referencing Exhibit B, which does spell out in more detail the actual compensation paid in this contract.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
I'd like to make a motion to approve the consent calendar.
Okay, any discussion, input from the public? If not, all in favor?
Aye. Aye.
Opposed? Abstain? That passes unanimously. We'll move to item 2, the Executive Committee report, which is mine. And the Executive Committee met on January 25th of this year, and we had an extensive discussion about our reserve policy, namely our working capital reserve and also our rate stabilization reserve. The committee supported staff's recommendation, which you'll all see later when we get to item 10, and we'll take comments and entertain motions at that time in item 10. Thank you. I will briefly state also that I was at the CPUC on-bank hearing and spoke about the importance of competition where there was no natural monopoly. And so it was an entertaining and very interesting hearing. It's certainly very political, and we have a number of strong advocates as we are moving forward with all the counties in the Bay Area. Almost every jurisdiction is electing this model. So it's quite interesting to see how the movement's developing. We'll move on to the CEO report. Tom?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Can you hear me okay? How about now?
Yes.
Few items to report on. First is the custom now is to start with the new hires. We are bringing in a regulatory and legislative analyst, and she will join us on February 13th. Her name is Hilary Staver. Hilary is working now for energy and environmental economics. That company is located in San Francisco, and she's been involved into a number of projects, including greenhouse gas emission modeling, grid design, energy resource evaluation, regulatory briefings. She's an undergraduate of the University of Maryland, and she got master's in environmental science from the University of Yale. She will join us again on the 13th. We also are interviewing for the position of account representative, and that is going to happen on the 24th of this month. And finally, we have 3 positions that are open. Those 3 positions are Community Outreach Manager, Director of Power Supply Resources, and Administrative Assistant. Please tell your friends. Second thing to report on is the financial policy. You did ask last meeting to bring it in February. We're still working on it, cleaning it up, doing all the edits that you have requested. And we thought tonight we'll bring you the reserve policy. Then next month we'll be able to bring all the financial policies, including the reserve policy, for approval. Chairman Sinks already spoke about the California Public Utilities Commission's in-bank hearing. That hearing had all the 5 commissioners. It wasn't just a single residing commissioner. It was all 5 commissioners that wanted to reside for on that hearing and listen to issues related to community choice aggregation only. They plan to do the same thing for direct access customers later on, because they realize that between the direct access customers as well as the community choice aggregation programs that are sprouting now all over California, the investor-owned utilities are slowly losing their customer base when it comes to supply resources. So they wanted to hear about CCAs. They will hear about the DAs later on, and we are likely to see proceedings that will come from the CPUC to address this ongoing phenomenon of customers one by one leaving the PG&E and Southern California Edison, as well as San Diego service territory. I've attached the not the minutes, but notes of the meeting, of the hearing that were actually put together by our new hire that hasn't started yet. She did come to the meeting, took lots of notes, and she emailed it to me, and in turn, we emailed them to you. There will be more to come, of course, on this issue, and I'm going to share it with you as it happens. Quick report on the enrollment in Silicon Valley Clean Energy. We have, to date, actually as of Friday, we sent over 27,000 notices, and we had 15 opt-ups, 14 residential customers, 1 commercial customer, and 36 opt-outs, 30 residential customers and 6 commercial. And the reason that was given by the majority of the folks that did opt out was they basically dislike being auto enrolled. They just don't want somebody to enroll them in a different program without them making that choice. We're still very early in notification process. There will be more notices going out, and eventually every month we will let you know what's going on. And I think on a weekly basis I will try to get a quick note to you, just to kind of give you an update about how many opt-outs, how many opt-ups. We finally now have an office with furniture in it and everything, and we have an open house on Friday. We invite all of you to come in, and everybody that took part in this work, and even the ones that didn't, we invite them all to come in and check out our home, so to speak, between 2 to 4 on Friday. Aside from that, there's just one single issue that isn't here on the list that I wanted to share with you, and I believe it's important enough that I would very much appreciate your input. If you recall, when we went out and bought locked in prices for some energy. Our intent was to buy 25% in type 1, which is resources connected into the California grid, another 25% in type 2, which is bundled energy. The premium for that is a little bit less expensive than the type 1 resource. And finally, 50% into carbon free. That was the arrangement that we worked on, and we went out to bid. All the numbers came very close to what I thought they would, except for the type 2 resource. We locked in some of that 25% that we were set out to lock in, but we left open almost 3/4 of the type 2 resource that still is an open position at this point. The idea was to wait until January, February. By that time, some of the suppliers will have a better idea about what the value of that resource is, because many of them shied away from supplying the type 2 renewable because they thought it's not going to be valued by the ARB as they thought it would. We have now gone out again just last week to try to fill that open position. We only got 2 suppliers that didn't come close to fill in the entire open position, and the premium price for that is still way too high. We can try again, or the 2 options that are open to us is to replace that open position for type 2 with a combination of type 1 and type 3. And I know that's going to upset at least one person on the board who doesn't like type 3. Type 3 is basically unbundled RECs, unbundled renewable energy credits that we can buy. Then we'll bundle it with resources that we buy here. It's still considered renewable, but it is not as popular as, of course, type 1 or type 2. Type 1 is the most expensive, so if we can bundle the 2 together and come up with a combination that will give us that premium that I was expecting to get from type 2, that would be one solution. Another is to couple type 1 with carbon-free or large hydro. If we do that, we won't upset too many people, but at the same time, we've been talking about 50% renewable, 50% carbon-free for quite some time. If we do a combination of type 1 as well as large hydro, then that percentage is no longer valid. So one way or the other, there will be something that won't work, whether with option 1 or option 2 that I've just laid on you. It is something that I would hope that you would think about, and maybe we'll come back next month and get a better direction. But we're still debating internally what would be the best course of action, because I can't get enough type 2 to fill that position. We can keep it open and deal with it as in real time, but my preference would be to fill that open position before we go ahead and start serving in April. So I'm going to leave that option there.
Tom, could you just go back? How much of our total power needs are uncovered in this type 2 category? It seems like this is going to be a few percent.
It was 25% that we needed to fill with type 2. We filled in 25% of that 25%. So we are leaving open now somewhere around maybe 16, 17% of our total load that was supposed to be covered by type 2.
And that's for 2017?
For 2017, 18, and beyond.
Okay.
Yeah, we only filled in that position for 17, 18, and 19, but we filled only a quarter of what we needed to fill. So we left open, the rest of it.
And I'm the unbundled RECs guy, so let me just go on record and say I really don't like unbundled RECs, but I'd rather have an answer that works. So if that means we have to do unbundled RECs, then I will not stand in the way of a good decision.
Are you looking, this is a discussion item, right? Because this is part of the CEO report. Are you looking for input tonight? I mean, we can't really,
Certainly,
we can't deal with a subject that's not agendized.
Yes, I'm not looking for direction, obviously, because as you put it, it's not agendized, but it's part of my report, and I'm making it verbally because that situation have just popped up today and yesterday, actually.
I intended mine to just be questions and clarifications of comments that I have made.
Yeah.
Okay,
Mr. Chair?
yes.
Yeah, similar question to clarify. So I think it would be helpful for me and perhaps other board members, when you come back to us, to give us the percentages that were just asked and the dollar amount, because I'd like to know what the percentage delta is between the type 2 cost and the type 1 cost, and know what our burden would be over the period of the contract, and to see if our cash flow could absorb it.
Certainly.
So,
Okay. Courtney, did you? Or Jeannie, okay.
okay. So can we hold until the next board meeting and agendize it at that point? Or are we in a position where the CEO needs to be taking action between now and the next board meeting?
My preference is always to try to be ahead of the actual service, but I wouldn't say I'm in such a hurry that I would want to go without direction on this one. I think it's important enough that I can come back to you in March and get direction. Then almost immediately, 2 days later, I can lock in whatever additional amount that I need to lock in of whichever type that we collectively choose to work with.
So in the meantime, you can continue to monitor the situation, right?
Yes, of course.
Okay, because I was just trying to figure out whether we have something that truly needs to be taking action on or not, so
No.
that sounds good.
Thank you. I had one question, and that related to our first speaker on oral communication. I believe the board's intention and our intention is to match PG&E table for table, rate for rate, with less expensive electricity. And the speaker, who's now left the room, talked about PG&E's smart rate. Have we addressed that, or have we not?
It is my understanding, and I'll turn in my head just to see if I got Don over here. Not this Don, the other Don. I got two Dons. Lucky me.
Don Bray?
No, he's not.
Okay.
We have. It's not just the intention, but it is the practice that I believe we have exercised, is to take 100% of all of PG&E's rates, reduce them by 1%, then from there calculate what our rates will be after we deduct the PCIA. On the website, we have given 2 or 3 different examples of how that would work, but in doing so, we just picked examples. We didn't actually take each and every one of the rates and include that in the example. But eventually, all of our rates basically are exactly the same as PG&E minus 1%. Now, there are certain things that PG&E is doing now. They are doing a pilot program to do time of use that they intend to default our customers, their customers into comes 2019. And we told them we've got one too many things going on, and I don't need to confuse our customers by doing a pilot program on the top of trying to phase them in. So we said, we're going to stay out of your pilot program. Go ahead and do what you need to do. And I'm not too sure if that's what that gentleman is referring to. I'm guessing not, that he is on a rate schedule of sort that he feels that we are not offering, which isn't the case.
So the smart rate thing is not, it's a rate schedule, but it's also, there's these 15 days that PG&E gets to declare sort of a power emergency, and they forecast it based on the temperature. So if it's over 98 degrees, then they could declare one of these things. And if you're using power inside this region, they have some outrageously high rate. So in exchange for this, you get somehow a lower rate schedule. What I'd like to do is understand first that we did duplicate their rate schedule minus 1%. And then the second thing is, what do we do on these special power days that PG&E declares? Because it's sort of like a dynamic schedule at that point. It's they get to pick the days that they have these outrageous rates. They notify the customers don't use power between 2 and 7. So,
I happen to be a customer, so they actually installed the device.
oh yeah, so you got it then. You know how this
in my home
works.
on my air conditioning and so forth. So I have been for a couple of years, and Yes, I'm sure our intention, right, is to the extent technically feasible, match any programs that were in effect at the beginning of this year.
Okay, if you would allow me just to investigate.
No, of
working
course.
with,
That was really the request, is get those details, because I hear things like this, and I heard this with some solar customers, and the trick is to have the facts so that we can explain to them, no, we've heard this, we've taken care of it, and no, we believe you're still better.
Right.
Glad to.
Certainly heard alternate facts in the en banc hearing as well, and I mean, to the extent that we've neglected to publish the schedule, I'm sure we can fix this, right? Burton, did you have a
Yes, just
question?
a quick statement. Nest is also running a program similar to that. I signed up for it, and they actually send a signal out to your device, and when you walk in, you see a special emblem on there that means that this is a high rate, and they actually turn your air conditioner down for you. And you're
nice.
supposed to get a slightly better rate from PG&E for participating in that type of program.
Very good.
So.
Thank you.
Could I?
And Jeannie?
So again, I think we've got to give the CEO a chance to look into this, and I don't believe we have anything that we've said as a board that says we are going to mirror everything. Because remember, our customers have the ability to opt out of this program. If there is if they, you know, it's our value system, right? If I have a higher value on green energy, I may be willing to, in this case, pay a little bit more for it. They still get their energy if they want to stay with PG&E. So I just don't want I don't want the CEO to walk out of here thinking that we've made any decision about whether or not we're going to match everything that PG&E does, or saying we're not, or not for a while.
I should highlight that there may be, whether it's now or in the future, and I can't be certain of that, that it would be a technical impossibility for us to actually mirror what they are doing. And I also should note that comes 2019, it would be my intent and is not to come back to you and say, I'm going to do exactly what PG&E is doing. I think by then we're going to be grown-ups and we can do our own, and we probably can take the 36 rate schedules that PG&E is doing right now and bring them down to a manageable number, 9 or 10. That would be kind of more palatable, and our customer can understand them better.
Okay. Margaret?
Yes.
Yep, you're on.
Great. So in regards to the gentleman who came and spoke, I haven't seen the postcard, but is there something we should be looking at altering on in terms of how we are going out to notice our potential customers?
We starting phase 1, so we are noticing all of our small, medium commercial, as well as 20% of our residential customers.
I guess, I'm sorry, I'm not being clear, but the gentleman had said on the postcard that we can beat, or we're beating PG&E rates, and he was upset that, in his case, that's not true. So do we need to be looking at potentially changing what our message is, or are we comfortable with what's being said?
Yeah, I will, first I need to look into whether he's correct or not. Then after that, whether if we change the message, what we change it to, or is the message as it is today sufficient to get the point across, and there will always be exceptions.
Sure.
And the question is, do we want to make sure that we list each and every one of them?
Great. Okay, thank you.
Rob, and then I have 2 cards from the public that may help clarify.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. If I could change the subject to another question. I'm assuming your report is done. We kind of jumped in.
Yes.
But I wanted to go back. You mentioned the enrollments and opt-outs, and we're all kind of anxious to see how we're doing. And I see, we only had 36 opt-outs out of 27,631 notices that were emailed or mailed. But can we count that as the full opt-out rate? Is it, 36 divided by this? I mean, how long before we know? I mean,
Generally, the experience of most CCAs is once the customer actually gets a bill, and the bill has SVCE generation cost and has a number right next to it, they begin to take notice of there's something different here, and that causes an additional number of people to realize that oh, I'm getting my generation from a different source now, and then you get more opt-outs. So far, the peninsula's rate has been running barely above 1%. San Francisco is less than 2%. I realize that this is a very small number, but I wouldn't suggest at all that you count on it as going to be the number that we will continue with. Likely it's going to go up. Whether it goes up beyond 1 or 2%, I don't know. I can tell you the experience of the folks that have been doing this in the last 6 months or so.
Okay, thank you.
I have 2 cards from the public.
Mr. Chair, I think we have.
Oh.
Did you have?
Yeah, I did.
Daniel, go ahead.
Just in regards to the opt-out, there's confusion in my community as to when the opt-out can actually take place. And some people are asking me if that opt-out, if it's true, whether or not the opt-out can only happen once they're rolled out.
Yeah, the opt-outs can happen anytime. Customer can opt out anytime. They can opt out before we serve them, after we serve them, after we send them the notices. Anytime they want to opt out, they can opt out.
So if they received the postcard last week, they could opt out today even though they're not already enrolled?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
And Mr. Chair, along the same lines, our 24/7 customer service lines are up and running now. Am I correct?
I believe so, yes.
Okay.
I got to check, but, okay.
Yes, okay.
Answer is yes.
So I think that's important for all of us to realize, and I'm sorry the gentleman didn't remain to get the full benefit of the discussions, because one of the things he didn't make clear is if he'd ever gotten any information from anything other than the webpage, if he'd ever actually called the hotline or done anything else. So that's always important for us to understand, sorry. And I would just like to second what Director Bruin said, which is that we never committed to beat PG&E on everything, because what we're doing is offering a different product than PG&E. We're offering the 100% greenhouse gas free and the 50% renewable, which the PG&E product is not. So I think that's extremely important to make clear as well.
Thank you. I'll open public input here. James Tulea, followed by Ron Svensson. And if anybody else wants to turn in a card, please do so now.
Hi, good evening. I'm James Tulea from Sunnyvale. I used to work in PG&E's energy efficiency business, which was in a sister group to the demand response team. So what the smart rate is, it's as also is Smart AC, a demand response program. Right. And as the earlier gentleman mentioned, it's an add-on to the otherwise applicable rate schedule that someone is on. So they're on a basic rate, and then this is an add-on. So Smart Rate is an add-on. NEM for solar customers is an add-on. So it isn't one of the fundamental rates. It's a demand response program. That said, it still appears to customers as part of their overall rate. And in the rate schedule at PG&E, it talks about you get this rate on all the other days of the year. It's a lower rate, but if you use energy during any of those 15 days, if they're called, your rate goes really far up. So there's a stick and a carrot to it. But just there will be more that the CEO and staff will be able to tell. But I just wanted to give you a little preview of what Smart Rate is. Smart Rate is distinct from Smart AC. They're both demand response programs.
Thank you very much. We have Ron Svensson.
Hi, my name is Ron Svensson. I'm actually a resident of Santa Cruz, but active here in the Valley in my business activities. And I just want to say that in relationship to this question which has been raised about rates, that there's also a defensive approach that can be taken on the supply side with solar resources in district, as the speaker said earlier during the public comment period. And I'd be happy to discuss technical details with your staff if you care to look at that as another way to address these questions about what do we do on a very hot day when the sun is shining.
Thank you very much. Any other cards from the public? Seeing none, I'll bring it back up here, see if there are any further questions before we move to our next agenda item.
I have one more comment, if I may.
Yes.
Relevant to the last speaker, we have had some very good educational classes on what the responsibilities of our JPA is and the knowledge of the product that we're producing. And one of the items that struck me as most interesting is that over time, when more energy is produced, particularly during the day, particularly by solar, actually is an excess amount of power produced, such that our old habits of never using the air conditioning in the afternoon and not doing your laundry late at night may end up being inverted, because we can actually get excess power during the day because we have such wonderful sunshine. So point well taken and appreciated.
Yeah, and I believe for that reason, PG&E is aggressively shifting peak rates toward the latter part, right? Late afternoon, early evening. So there's a lot in flux right now because of the duck curve, right? Good. I believe you announced that you have some customers who have opted up. Is that correct?
Yes.
So I'm one of them.
Me too, Rod.
And anybody else on the dais here or in the audience? Okay.
You don't have to be.
You don't have, so if you want to be our customer in April,
Green Prime at any time.
you can, yeah,
So you can do it now.
yeah. So anyway, thank you very much for that report.
Sure.
We'll move on then to the treasurer's report, item 4. And welcome Don Eckert.
Yeah.
All right, good evening, Board of Directors. This is our initial treasurer's report to the board. This report in the future will be a much more robust report as we get into operations, but I thought to just get things started, we would focus on cash and expenses. So where we stand at the end of January is we have roughly $865,000 of working capital cash. As far as financing goes, we've got $2 million of available non-revolving line of credit that we have not touched yet. We also have a $18 million revolving line of credit with River City Bank that we have tapped into. Roughly $1 million of that was drawn in December to transfer into our lockbox to be able to execute the power supply agreements, and then another $1.5 million was drawn as far as to be as a debt service reserve. As far as our operating cash, we averaged around December and January around a cash burn rate about $200,000 a month. However, that will increase as we add staff and we get closer to operations. Combine that though with the cash that we have on hand as well as our non-revolving line of credit, and we should be fine as we get into May, when around late May is when we should see our cash coming in from operations. We also will be looking to take a draw on the non-revolving line of credit of around $500,000. Tom will brief you later tonight on the reasons for that, but basically it's to fund a deposit with California ISO to be able to participate in the congestion revenue market. And again, Tom will brief you more on that later. Regarding the budget, in the report I did compare expenses to budget based on what was presented in November. As we have more recent information with the rates on the revenue side as well as on the expenses, we feel it's a good time to present an amended budget to this board in March. Much more detail, much more into what you would be used to seeing at the governmental accounting level. Some highlights on the expense side. Personnel services, we've added some folks, as Tom mentioned. Also on the benefit side, starting with January 20th pay period, we implemented the PARS, our Public Agency Retirement System, as well as we went through an enrollment of medical benefits and health benefits that will be available for our employees beginning February 1st. On the general administrative line item, some highlights include the loan fee of about $77,000 to be able to obtain those lines of credit. Professional services, the majority of the program development costs are contributions by our city members, And on the marketing and communications, that's well below budget, as the actual costs and what we have in the contract will be much better than what we originally forecast last year. And also, we have very low cost year-to-date as those costs are now ramping up, and you'll see that number grow in February. And then we have a small interest expense incurred in the non-operating section for the $1 million draw that we took on our revolving line of credit. This concludes the treasurer's report. Happy to take any questions.
Thank you. And I'd just add to your report, for those of you who are new to the board and find this all a little microscopic and short-term, when we get to item 10, I assure you, you will see what we anticipate our cash flow being over the years. So in particular, the next to last page of your packet, 129, shows expected revenues and operating expenses to put some of this into context for those of you who are new. And I'd add that before I entertain any comments or questions from board members. Courtney?
Hi, and thank you for the report. So as I understand it, this is from October to date, and the numbers do look a little strange in general and administrative. Specifically, this fee is $77,000 as part of this 181, which far exceeds the budget of 150. Is the 150 year for the entire year, and we've exceeded it by 30 already, and you anticipate going significantly higher in the next 3 remaining quarters?
No, that's the loan fee would be, the two main components of that would be the loan fee and then the fee for the California Public Utilities Commission. Do not anticipate any much more on the actuals for that. As far as compared to budget, the budget was put together back in October, November. Obviously, that will be part of what we relook at when we present the amended budget.
And for that matter, the professional services seems to far exceed what we expected just in 1 quarter for the entire year. Do we make up for that once cash starts rolling in?
Yeah, a lot of that is timing right now, and
Okay.
definitely we will be making up for that.
Thank you.
You know, I would add that this budget was prepared, in September or thereabouts, at a time when we'd struck none of these agreements. We had a completely different idea about how we were going to procure credit. We were thinking we would get it from cities, for example. We ended up finding a better offer with the bank, and so a lot of things, I mean, you really, at least for me, it helps to think about this Silicon Valley Clean Energy as a startup in some flux, right? And in the long term, we have a very healthy cash flow. And frankly, within a year, we have a very strong cash flow. But yes, I think at the time we put a budget together, details about how we would progress were fairly hazy, and our staffing plans and needs have been adjusted as we've gone along here. So.
Sorry, I appreciate that, and I would expect that we'll have a 6-month update for the annual budget that would make sense of all of this as we get into operations.
Yeah, and so if we get a report in March and a forward-looking
Correct. That'll be
forecast, I think that'll be most
you.
helpful.
And can I also make a comment?
Surely.
Also for our new board members and such, understand when we started off, we had a lot of staff on loan. And so Don, you've been with us for how long now?
Late November, actually.
So we've got some staff that's coming on, and now we should be, like I said, I think I heard you say that in March, they're going to be bringing in something that has more, some changes that are going to reflect what we actually know at this point in time, and where we have our own people in looking and analyzing this. So don't be too nervous or uncomfortable about the numbers they're showing you right now.
This is a classic Silicon Valley startup. And back at the time this budget was prepared, we had exactly 1 employee, plus some loaners from various cities. So, yeah. Any other comments or questions? Any input from the public? Seeing nothing, we will conclude this discussion. Thank you so much, Don. We'll move on to item 5, to elect a chair and vice chair of this body. At the time we got started, we decided we wanted to rotate more or less on a calendar year, and we felt that we'd have a number of cities that hadn't made appointments yet, so we deferred this to February, but we're now at a point where we are prepared to elect a chair for this year and a vice chair. And so I would open nominations for chair. Yes.
I'd like to nominate Rob Rennie.
Okay, do I see a second?
I'll second.
Very good. Any other nominations? If not, I'll close and ask for a vote. All those in favor of Rob Rennie as our chair, do you accept, sir?
I do accept exuberantly, thank you.
Thank you.
Exuberant, wow.
So all in favor of Rob Rennie as chair of Silicon Valley Clean Energy for 2017?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Abstained? Congratulations.
Thank you. Okay.
Okay.
And chairperson, if I may make a comment before we take the
Please, go ahead.
So again, because we have new players and such, and then also for all of us that were here when we did our appointments of the chair and the vice chair last time, one of the things we did talk about, and I want to kind of bring it back to the table, was when we look at the formation of this agency, we had 4 founding members, and then we had all the rest of us, okay? And I made a point then in saying that my personal preference, and I think the board at that point kind of agreed in concept at least, we didn't codify anything, that we look at having, when we have a non-founding member in one seat, we look at having a founding member in the other seat. Do you remember that? So that's how we ended up with a founding member, which was Rod Sinks, representing the founding members, and then we had Rob Rennie coming in as a non-founding member. And if we stay with that, I would like to move forward with propose a nomination of Jim Griffith from Sunnyvale.
Second.
So I asked Jim, and he said he wasn't interested.
He's in the back of the room shaking his head.
He's not shaking it in the
Jim,
positive either.
Are you here? No? Okay, then I withdraw my nomination.
Well,
I'd like to follow on.
Before we do this, I just want to say, as the outgoing chair, I appreciate all the support that I received from all of you. It was quite an honor to be selected as the first chair. I honor Jim Griffith and his service, and I would greatly welcome him were he to want to take on this role or be put in rotation next. But I would say, just for my part, I appreciate the cities that and the county for getting this going. But frankly, at this point, I think it really, I will tell you that I've spent an incredible amount of effort and time in the startup, more in the executive committee and with staff than actually in these board meetings and on legislative advocacy. And so it's really, I think, the most appropriate thing to do is to look at who, has been through the executive committee and who has put time in and who is willing to continue to put that substantial time commitment in. I think that's the most important thing. We're a fairly technical body, and this, like most any startup, right, we're trying to de-risk our future and stabilize our future. And so people that have that experience, I think, are good candidates for this role. So anyway, I just really very much appreciate the chance to have done this, and that'll conclude my comments.
And so I guess, am I chair or are you chair now?
You're chair. You're chair.
I guess you're chair. Go ahead.
Who's got the gavel?
It's too late to turn back.
No, you're right.
Well, let me just thank Rod for his service. And you did attack it very passionately, and I hope that you will continue to be just as involved in the past chair role, I guess it is. So thank you.
You're most welcome.
Steve?
Yeah, I was going to nominate Dan Harney for the vice chair role.
Do I have a second?
I would second that. I think it would be great to have South County representation, and you have some unique issues in South County just being south.
Do I have interest from Mr. Harney?
I would gladly accept.
Okay. Do I have any other nominations? Okay, seeing none, I will call for the vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Anybody opposed? All right, we have a vice chair, Director Harney, unanimously elected. Should we see if there's any public comments on this item before we finish up? Go ahead and approach.
Oh, sorry. I better go sit in the corner.
I am Bruce Carney, a
Thank you,
Mountain
Bruce.
View resident. I certainly would like to thank Rod and all the other members of the founding board, as well as all the new members. I do have a question. I'm slightly embarrassed to bring this up, but I was under the impression that directors needed to be elected officials from a city and that an alternate could be a non-elected official. And I was under the impression that Mr. Harney had not been reelected. I'd be happy to be wrong about any of this, but I did think it was important to bring it up in case I'm right.
So I can help you with that myself. Director Harney was not reelected, but there was an opening because the mayor moved up, I think, or somebody moved up to mayor, and he was reappointed. So he is a council member from Gilroy still.
I'm very happy to hear that. Second time's the charm, I guess. Wonderful news. Thank you very much for clarifying that for me.
Anybody else? Staff, anything else I need to do on this one? Shall I close this item?
Yes, that's complete now.
All right, so we'll move on to number 6, appointing executive committee members. Does staff have anything to say on this one?
No, at this point, the chair and vice chair serve on the executive committee, and then you appoint 4 additional members. So that'd be the action tonight would be to pick 4 additional members to serve on the executive committee.
All right, so the chair and vice chair would be me. I assume Director Harney is willing to continue serving on the executive committee?
Yes.
All right. Director Gibbons.
Thank you. I would put for discussion that the 2 remaining of the previous 4 be considered, which would be Director Miller and myself, since we have the vacancy from John and from Rod. So that would be my suggestion for discussion, for continuity.
Can I ask a clarifying question? So what about, is Rod included in that as the past chair, immediate past chair? No.
If I may, we haven't made any decision on that because we haven't discussed it before now.
Yeah, we haven't, when we first formed the executive committee, we didn't have a past chair, so we didn't create that. I don't think it's, well, I guess I'd leave it up to the board, but I think we should be able to just elect past chair if he wants to, and we think it's a good person, but I don't think it needs to be the past chair.
I think it would be very advisable to have the past chair.
So would you like to nominate the past chair?
I certainly would.
Do you accept the nomination,
well-
past chair?
I would accept the nomination. I think it's healthy for continuity, and I agree with Liz on the other 2 who have served. I think they have served with distinction on the executive committee, and to the extent they're interested, I'd like to see them continue as well.
Can I add the other 2 to the nomination?
Absolutely. I'll accept that.
For us newbies, can you please tell me who we're talking about?
Howard.
Thank you.
Howard,
So-
Jim, and Liz.
Okay, got it.
So I'll second that motion.
Okay, Director Gibbons.
If I may, I would just offer that there is some advantage to having a rotation of, 2 in, 2 out. Again, we're new, but it's always, in my experience, prudent to allow the ability to retain knowledge. So I'm hoping we get some new people in that can carry on the knowledge, because we are going to want to take advantage of that knowledge as we need new chairs and vice chairs, and there are some special committees coming up, the Risk Management Committee and others, that would benefit from the experience of being on the executive board.
Well, we certainly will have one new member of the executive committee at a minimum.
So can we ask, is there anybody else who's interested in this? Or do any of our new people need a little bit more information in terms of what the executive committee does?
Yeah,
And when they meet.
So can you maybe add some color, somebody?
We spend a whole bunch of time every time Tom needs us. No. It is long, and there's a lot of homework.
Are there
That's
regular meetings?
my only comment. Yes, there are regular meetings.
Yeah,
Tom can
we're-
give you those details. But it's the workload that's more interesting because we're the one who have to review a lot of these documents, soup to nuts, and there's a lot of lively discussion. So this is not a show up and sit in a seat on as wallflowers. This is a very engaged group.
Tom, could you add a
Love
little
to have
bit here?
anybody.
Sorry?
Can you add a little bit to the expectations of the executive committee?
Yeah, generally, we hold one meeting per month, and it would be, at this point, it's scheduled for the fourth Wednesday. It's between 2 and 4. We try to shift it to 12 and 2, but we're definitely backing off because Director Gibbons said that she does have a conflict on that day for that time, so we will stick with the 2 to 4 on Wednesdays unless the executive committee decides to move it a day earlier or a day later. Then we can have that meeting be 2 hours around lunchtime, perhaps between 11:30 and 1:30 or 12 to 2, something like that. But that's going to be discussed eventually with the executive committee when we meet with them next month, the fourth Wednesday, between 2 and 4.
And what kinds of things does the executive committee discuss and cover?
Anything that we would like to have board members dive a little deeper into, anything that we need to discuss and spend a little time talking about. For example, the job classifications, the salary compensation, all the HR rules. We took that to the executive committee and discussed it at length for quite some time, for several months actually, before we eventually brought the whole package to the board of directors. It was a whole lot easier then for the board to take it and move it forward because they knew that 6 other members, or half of them, already looked at it very carefully and spent some time on it. We also discussed the reserve policy with the executive committee because we thought we needed a little more time to spend on it and talk about it a little bit more than we are able to do that during board meetings. So.
Could you also briefly summarize the other opportunities that will be upcoming for other subcommittees that are planned?
Yeah, we are planning one committee that I think it's probably one of the most important committees that we need to have, which is Energy Risk Management Committee, and that will have likely 5 board members on it. We also have 2 committees that we are thinking about. One is the Finance Committee, and we'll put that together sometime in June or July of this year. And we'll also have a technical committee, and the technical committees most likely be bringing in technical people, so the sustainability staff that you have on in your cities, those will be the likely participants on that committee. And as we move forward, if there's a need for additional committees, we will do that.
Okay, so let me just summarize where we are. So we have a 12-member board, so we can't have a quorum, so we're limited to 5 members on the executive committee.
Six.
Correct, 6. And so far we've said the chair and the vice chair should be on the executive committee, and we've had nominations for Director Gibbons, Director Miller, and Director Sinks. So Director Gibbons.
So I'd like to offer one nomination, which would be Director Margaret, and then offer one additional clarification for other board members. Correct me if I'm wrong, the other committees that we've been discussing, the Risk Management Committee, the Finance Committee, and the Technical Committee, would be appointed by the Executive Director due to the content of the information.
Only the Risk Oversight Committee.
Only the risk?
Yes, only the Risk Oversight. Finance Committee will be a board committee.
So it's in other words, it's. I thought it would be important to understand that those then would be public meetings and so on and so forth. So just
Yes.
so everybody knows. Okay, thank you.
So let me ask Director Abe Koba, are you interested?
Yes.
Okay. Director Tate, you made the motion. Would you like to add this to the motion, or should we make it a second?
Certainly, I would be delighted to do so.
And Director Craig, are the seconder okay with you?
Yes, it is.
Okay, so we have a motion now for the executive committee to be made up of the chair, myself, Director Rennie, Vice Chair Director Harney, Director Gibbons, Director Miller, Director Sinks, and Director Abe Koba. Any other discussion? Okay, let's call the question. All in favor?
Aye.
Anybody opposed? So we have unanimous with Director Cortese is now absent. Okay. I assume we can wrap that item up and move on to number 7, approve master transaction and confirmation agreement with Regenerate Power LLC. Does staff have a report for us on this?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, if you would allow me a quick 5 minutes introduction to both the item 8, 9, item 7, 8, and 9. Then we can take them one item at a time and ask for approval. Generally, there are 4 products that we have to acquire on the supply side of our operation. I'm going to go through them one at a time. One is the one that you're very familiar with, is the energy side. You buy the kilowatt hours that the customer consumes. You're familiar with that because you see it on your bill. You get charged per kilowatt hour. That we need to buy. That's one product that we need to acquire. Generally constitutes somewhere around 80% of our total cost of the supply side. The second product is capacity or demand response or resource allocation, and you hear expressed in so many ways. It's basically you need to buy sufficient amount of power on a monthly basis that will be good enough to cover the highest peak, the highest consumption in any given hour of that month, plus another 15%. This is basically a product that the regulators tell you that you must have in your portfolio to assure that there's resources, power supplies online to meet your maximum demand at any given time, at any given month. And that product roughly constitutes somewhere around 5% of the total cost of supply. The third product, another one that you're very familiar with, is what we need to do in order to take our energy from what it is to have it be renewable resource or carbon-free resource. Basically, it's the adder, the premium that we have to pay in order to clean up that energy that we bring into the city at the source. And that roughly comes to maybe 12%, maybe closer to 15%, depending on how much of each bucket you buy, so to speak. Finally, the last product, and that one is actually a benefit rather than a cost, is an allocation on the highway of transmission lines. Basically, the ISO tells us that your customers have earned the right to have certain allocation on transmission lines that at times becomes congested. A lot of suppliers want to buy on the line, and because we already paid for that transmission line, as a load-serving entity, we get to have the right to have allocation on that line that will help us reduce our supply costs, so we didn't end up paying congestion charges. Those who are not load-serving entities, those who own generation and want to move the electricity on that line, they end up having to pay congestion charges sometimes when the line is congested, when you have too much electricity on contract and not enough rated capacity on the line itself. So that is an allocation that we ask for. Eventually, if we don't use it, we end up have it be used by someone else and get the revenue rights that comes from selling the congestion right to other people who could use that allocation. So these are the 4 products that we need to buy. And with that, I can start with, Mr. Chairman, I can start with item number 7. when we requested a number of supply resources, when we went out with an RFP, one of the suppliers was one that has a solar units down in close to Imperial Irrigation District. They were willing to sell us only for 5 years, which is what we limited everyone to. And their price was reasonable. We negotiated that price down considerably from the first time when we started talking to them. We did not get that agreement done or the negotiations concluded before we concluded the negotiations with everybody else. So what we did when we locked in contracts with everybody, which you have approved on December 14th, we left a little open door for an additional somewhere around 11% of the total amount of renewable that we need. We left that position open because we figured once we finish negotiating this agreement, we will be able to bring that energy in, and pretty much that completes all the amount of energy that we need from bucket one. And before you is the EEI, or the enabling agreement, that will allow us to work that arrangement with Regenerate. Once you approve it tonight, then tomorrow we'll go ahead and lock in the prices with that company. And that's my summary of item number 7. And once you folks act on it, then we can move on.
Okay, so the action that we're working towards is to approve the agreement and the confirmation with the Regenerate Power LLC for the purchase of renewable energy. Do we have questions from the board? Director Bruins, please.
Yes, mic on?
Yeah, should be.
Okay, is it on?
Yes.
Clarifying question first, and that is this a 4-year or 5-year? Because it says in the staff report 5 years. Is it 4 years?
It's really 4 years. It starts January 2018, ends December 2021, and that's 4 years. So the 5-year that's in the staff report was incorrect. We did send a correction earlier today.
Okay, I'm sorry I missed. And then everything in terms of this this confirmation document, is that the same boilerplate as all the other ones? Is there anything new in this one that was not done in all the others?
No, very similar to the one that we signed up with the 3 phases back in December.
Okay, so it has all the exact same things, so like the customer information and all the security, that
Yes.
section 12, the lockbox, everything else is still the same, right?
Yeah. Yep.
Okay. And then this says it's a new solar generator. So what does new mean?
As in, they are building it. It will come online before 2018.
Okay, so
It will come online this year. So it's being built.
and so is there any risk in terms of if it's not done? I mean, we're buying energy from them. If something hiccups, then what?
That's generally why we have an EAI that allows for accounts that they put money into, account that we put money into. If either one of us doesn't live up to expectations and we find ourselves having to pay a little extra in order to acquire the same amount of energy from the market at that time, then we dip into whatever account that they have on hold for us.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
Director Sinks?
Is it fair to say that anticipating Silicon Valley Clean Energy and other CCEs, this company has elected to build this facility? In other words, our existence or pending existence has been motivation to create new renewable resource in the state of California?
Oh, most certainly, yes.
I think that's a really important point, and I wish some folks at the en banc hearing had gotten that message, but I think we ought to do a lot to get our message out here.
It's getting out there. It's getting louder and louder, and I think people are hearing it.
Yeah, thank you.
Any other questions, comments? So I'll open the public testimony. Would anybody, a member of the public, wish to speak to us on this item? I see none. I will close the public testimony. Any other comments, motion, questions from the board? Director Gibbons.
I would make a motion to approve I should read the whole motion.
Or you could just say staff recommendation. unless
Staff
you're changing it.
recommendation.
Second?
Okay, I have a motion and a second. Any other comments? All right, let's call the question. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Anybody opposed? So we have unanimous with Director Cortese absent. So let's go to item number 8. Any additional discussion, report on that?
Sure. This is two different contracts with two different companies for the resource adequacy. This is one of the products that we need to have just to prove that we can meet the highest demand on the system in any given month, plus 15%. We don't generally need to rush and buy this for the long term. Certainly, we can buy it on a monthly basis if we need to. My preference is to lock in the summertime because that can become very expensive, especially if you have a hot summer. So we are locking some definitely in April. We have to have that locked up now. And we have portions of May and June, and we already in discussion with Sonoma Clean Power. They have some excess resource adequacy. We may buy some of theirs as well. So that will be something that we will do continuously as throughout the year, month by month. And the two agreements that we're bringing into you are new agreements with these two companies. One with Shell, which we have an energy agreement with, not capacity, and the other one is with NRG, this is the first time we deal with them. So I'm asking for approval so we can go ahead and unlock some of that capacity tomorrow.
Okay, so the goal recommendation we're looking forward is to authorize our CEO to execute these agreements for this purchase of resource adequacy capacity as necessary for Silicon Valley Clean Energy's regulatory obligations.
I'll move item 8, an agreement with, agreements with NRG and Shell.
Second.
Question?
We will need to ask for any public testimony first before the vote.
Okay.
Question as well.
Director Bruins, go ahead with the question.
So again, sometimes things just, they hit, and sometimes they go like this. So when I look at this, then, is this something that you'll be coming back? So like every month we would be seeing something? Because when I look at this, like April, we got, NRG with megawatts, and then in May we've got something. June we have nothing. July we got May, July, August, September are really small numbers. So I'm just trying to understand, why are there gaps, and is there a target in terms of how much we're trying to do in each of the months? And so a little bit more.
Yeah, glad to. Certainly, there's a target for each month that equals the highest capacity forecasted for that month plus 15%. So that's our target on a monthly basis going through the year. When we buy it, we go to a number of them and say, what can you offer us? This is how much we need, and they all come in with prices. It can vary a great deal, and that has to do sometimes with the fact that one of them is just got that additional capacity, just want to rid of it, and it's a small number. They can't sell it to PG&E or to Southern California Edison, for example, and so they're willing to give a really low price on it. Others have just a general number that's competitive with the rest of them. So what we do is just we take the smallest numbers available, and we ask ourselves, can we go out again, for example, and tap into PG&E and ask PG&E would allow us to go and bid on some of the capacity resources that they have. So we're probably going to put some prices to PG&E that will be lower than the prices that were bid by some of those companies, and that's why you see certain gaps. If we look at what's being offered and we feel that this is a little too rich, a little too expensive, then we hold back and examine what the options are, and we may have to go and bid on PG&E's capacity and see if we can get it cheaper. If not, then we may have to go back to one of those and say we'll take it at whatever price that they offered it at.
Okay, then one more question. In terms of, this is on the discussion on the regular agenda versus on the consent. Is it because of the dollar figure? If this is something that's going to be happening on a recurring basis, is this something that because of the dollar we will always have to put it on the regular, or is it something that going forward, now that we have a better understanding of what this is, it can be a consent item going forward?
It will be, if we have a new a new agreement with a new company that we never dealt with before for this or that product, then we'll always come back to you and give you a redacted information. Then, if we are dealing with that company in the future to buy any capacity, it will be done,
Okay.
and we'll report on it after the fact.
Thank you.
Okay, any other questions? So let me, see none, I'm going to open the public testimony. Would any member of the public wish to address us on this item? Seeing no one coming forward, I will close the public testimony. I did have a motion by Director Sinks and a second by, was it Director Miller? Gibbons, Director Gibbons. Okay, I have a motion by Director Sinks and a second by Director Gibbons. Is there any more discussion? Okay, so I'll call the question. All in favor?
Aye.
Anybody opposed? Was unanimous with Director Cortese absent. So number 9, any further staff report for number 9, please?
Certainly. This is the issue of buying certain rights on congested transmission lines. In general, if we lock in agreements with suppliers to deliver to NP15, which is pretty much the California ISO's point that we can take from without having to worry about congestion or any of that. If we go and lock in what we're entitled to on transmission lines that we know will become congested at one point or another during the year, and we do it right, and I believe that we have a very good likelihood, 90% plus, to be able to do it right, we should be able to realize somewhere between $5 to $12 million revenue from that source. Even if we end up buying something down south that we need to move north on a congested line, then we will be able to reduce any congestion prices that we have to pay because we have rights on that transmission line. So it's either we get revenue or we reduce cost. And in order for us to do that, we need to buy rights on these transmission lines. For us to do that, we have to basically tell the California ISO, we want to buy this much capacity on this line, this much capacity on that line, on all the lines that connects Northern California to south, north, and east. For that to happen, then California ISO basically tell us that you are required to deposit $500,000 into a bank until such time when you have either $1 million worth of net assets or $10 million worth of actual assets. And after that, you can take your $500,000 back. The reason being that even though the chances are considerably great that you will be able to make money off that, there's still the 5% chance that you could end up losing money, and definitely the ISO want to make sure that if you do, that they can dip into that bank account or in that collateral amount of money that you put aside and take whatever loss that you have incurred. And in order for us to be able to get rights on these lines starting April, we need to actually, by tomorrow, show the ISO that we, one, have a quasi-risk management policy, which is attached to this report that you have, and two, that we have a check go into their account, the account that they open in our name for $500,000. Then it will take them 6 weeks from that time to be able to give us the option of buying rights on transmission lines. So what we're asking for tonight is for you to approve, one, allowing us to transact for this product with the California ISO, and two, allow us to deposit $500,000 into, it's going to be into Union Bank actually, into the California ISO to be a collateral for the deals that we're going to be making with them. And also to submit to them the risk management policy which we put together. It's definitely not the risk management policy that will eventually end up with. The other one is going to be a little bit more extensive. This one just targeted for that product that we are trying to work with the ISO on. And so we're asking for your approval of that as well.
So question, Director Sinks?
So I'm interested to know from a technical point of view, how do we determine which transmission lines we need to reserve capacity on? Do we have a great simulation model, or do we count on one of our contractors to go say we need, 3% capacity on this one and 2% on that one and so forth, or how does that work?
Yeah, generally these are the 500 kV lines. These are kind of like one line, not a number of them.
Three
So you have
strands in a big cable.
Exactly. There's a span that connects Northern California and Southern California. It's called Path 15, for example. It's very well known to be congested for quite some time in the path from south to north nowadays, especially with all the solar that's being built down south and all the consumption of it, contractually speaking, that happens up north. So you know that this is going to be, comes the summertime, this line is going to be congested, and you know you have up to this amount that you can lock in with the California ISO, so generally that's what you do. Some other path, you know that it's not going to be a congested path, so you stay away from, you don't try to buy.
You have a model and you have some consultants to tell you where you need reservation
I can
and where
assure
you
you
don't
this.
have to bother.
I can assure you that you are correct. I don't do that myself.
Yeah, so it's like an insurance policy on
Yes.
capacity. And if we get it a little wrong, we just pay a congestion fee, is that right? We can still get our electricity, it's just, there's a premium.
You basically say, I want my allocation on this line, and the ISO says, well, that costs $2 per.
And there's a market for that, so
Yeah,
somebody that
exactly.
has an excess based on a reservation could.
Exactly.
Oh, okay. And then finally, this plug that you've put in here, this risk management policy, I assume will be the subject of considerable debate by this new CEO-appointed committee that you talked about in the prior
Most
item.
definitely, yes.
That we're doing this for now is so that we can secure these rights, but over time we will develop something. You will develop something with help from this appointed.
It will be a lot more extensive. It will be a lot more well-developed, and it will cover just about every product that we get into. This is just to cover the capacity rights that we want to buy from the ISO, and I wouldn't have done it except that the California ISO folks said, if you don't have it, and if you don't have it approved by your board, then you can't transact.
I understand. So did you grab this from another CCE, or?
This is really taken from a couple of documents that eventually will be shared with the Risk Oversight Committee when that committee is formed.
I see, very good. Well, thank you.
So, question, Director Corrigan.
Hi, a couple quick ones. The money will immediately start earning interest, not wait the full 6 weeks before it starts earning interest, is that, albeit a small amount, but.
I wish I can answer the question. I would assume that it will earn once it gets deposited into Union Bank. I would assume we will earn very little interest, but I would assume it will.
And I had the opportunity to ask a few of these questions beforehand, but for the record, the money once returned, do you have a timeline when we will have enough capital to repay this and put the money back or have the assets available so that we won't need to have this money on deposit?
Yeah, I would assume probably it won't take us long before we start locking in some long-term arrangements that will get us the $1 million net assets. I mean, I know we have enough furniture now to cover about 100,000 computers and such, so that, we're getting there.
Okay, let me go to Director Smith next, since you haven't had a chance to ask questions.
Yes, thank you, Chair. So I was wondering, what is the timeline? This is a great first effort, and I appreciate your diligence to get this on the books, but as a risk management plan, this has got a lot of gaps in it, like there's no disaster recovery things or anything like that.
Happy to answer your question. As first timeline, I've waited until tonight when the executive committee is formed, so at least I can have an idea who's going to have a little more time on their hands, so to speak, to be able to participate on the risk oversight committee. So tomorrow I'll put those names together and I will call on you folks and go from there to try to form or have the first meeting for the Risk Oversight Committee to happen this month.
So that's great.
The second answer is I just don't want to leave that unanswered. This is Energy Risk Management Committee. It's not going to be dealing with disaster preparedness and things that you're more accustomed to from a risk management. Risk management in a city is the group that deals with what do we do when a disaster strikes. This energy risk management deals only with net open positions and what will be the amount of energy that you need to buy in what month in order to minimize your exposure to market price fluctuations. This is that kind of a risk management. It doesn't deal with physical risk management, if you will.
Okay, so thanks for clarifying.
Sure.
I guess my question would be, for the specific kind of risk you're discussing here, could you explain what your timeline is for having something in place? I know you haven't kicked that off yet, but what, in your perfect world, how long do you anticipate that you would need in order to bring it back to the board?
I would say probably 2 meetings with the Energy Risk Oversight Committee. We should be able to have something to bring back to the board. Perhaps I would say April or May.
Okay, and then my question is to the chair, will the board be looking at other kinds of risk management as well? Like the more disaster recovery kind of risks, that sort of thing?
So I'm not sure I can answer that. Originally, I was, very early on, we talked about risk management and risk matrices and so forth. And I was thinking all kinds of risks, not just the energy sort of procurement risks. And you at the time said we would be bringing risk forward. And this is what you were thinking of at the time, correct?
Yeah, it's always been price risk, regulatory risk, credit risk. These are the risks. All of it is really have to do with the dollars and cents related to power supply. That is the only thing I'm thinking about. All the other risks, as I mentioned, that you are accustomed to, that has to do with human resources, that has to do with disaster preparedness. All that is not anywhere on my radar screen.
At this time.
Well, if Sunnyvale, for example, was underwater because of global warming, then we'd have to worry about the risk of moving the office to beachfront property in North Cupertino. Sorry.
If I can move on, I think Director Bruins, you had your hand up next.
Yeah, just in terms of making the motion, are you looking for, there's 3 items under the recommendation. Is that one motion or each of those individually?
One motion should summarise.
Okay, and then in terms of the document, I will give, there's 2 typos in there. In section 5, I know. So I'm ready to make a motion. So I move the recommendation, all 3 elements of the recommendation.
Second.
Okay, I have a motion and a second, and Director Gibbons had, nope, going to pass. Okay, and then I just want to make it clear, maybe you already said it, so that this Risk Oversight Committee is not a board-elected committee, it's appointed by the CEO. So this will just happen, as long as the board realizes they're not going to be voting on this at some point. It's going to happen. Any other discussion, questions? I haven't opened public testimony yet, actually.
Just one point, Mr. Chairman. The board eventually will vote on the risk management document. The risk management policy will come to you, and you'll get to vote on it. You'll get to see it and be satisfied with it. From that point forward, you only get to vote on fixing up the document, and you will also get to see what the board's function eventually become when the risk management policy comes to the board. There will be responsibilities for the Risk Oversight Committee, responsibilities for the front office, the middle office, and the back office that will be engaging in transactions. All that's going to be clarified, made made public, and you get to approve it. Beyond that, all the numbers that we will decide on, the strategies for acquisition of supply, what to buy, when to buy it, what to lock in and what to not to lock in, that will not be in the public domain.
Okay, let me open public testimony. I haven't done that yet on this item. Is there anybody that would like to speak to us on item number 9 from the public? Seeing nobody coming forward, I will close the public testimony. We have a motion by Director Bruins and a second by...
I think I wanted to make just one comment to tail on Tom's, if I could.
Please.
So, normally in bodies like this, we are a public agency. We do things under the Brown Act. The reason this is a special committee formed by the CEO and not a board-appointed committee is because we are dealing with information which by its nature, we can't release to the public. It deals with sensitive and confidential information, and I don't know, Greg, if you want to elaborate, but
No,
I just wanted to provide that explanation to new board members for whom this has not been discussed.
This be a CEO-appointed committee just to protect the confidentiality of the information. This is not a Brown Act subject committee.
And that's hence the reason that it needs to be appointed by an executive rather than the board.
That's correct.
Thank you.
Is there any other questions on that subject? So I have a motion by Director Bruins, and the second came from Director Miller. Is any other comments? So let me call the question on the motion. All in favor?
Aye.
Anybody opposed? So unanimous with Director Cortese absent. Let's go to item number 10. Establish and fund stabilization reserves, working capital reserves. This is a discussion item.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm going to ask Don, if he's still with us, to step up and just help me if I step into anything that needs correction. What we are asking here is, this is more of a discussion item. We at this point, we are not asking for approval. We'll bring that policy back to you in March and ask for your approval then. Don, you can say. What we wanted to do, if you recall back when we started in June, I've recommended that we set aside 5% of revenue to deal with rate stabilization fund and also to pay back the cities for the funds that they have gave us to initiate the business. At that time, we did not know what our rates will be. We did not know what supply costs are going to be. We just wanted to have a placeholder to deal with rate stabilization fund. And now that we have got to the point where we know what our cost is going to be for 2017, 2018, and you already approved a policy of setting our rates at 1% below the January published rates of PG&E, and leave it there for the next 2 years, we have a reasonable idea about what our costs and expenses, our costs and revenues look like over the next couple of years. The question then that we faced is, to the extent that we have surplus, and we know that we're going to have surplus, looking at our pro forma, what to do with that surplus. So we decided to look at 4 different scenarios, future scenarios that could happen, and what is the likely outcome of costs and revenues will be. First, we wanted to look at the variables, the things that can change, that can make a great deal of difference in our costs or in our revenue. When it comes to cost, the things that impact it quite a bit is, the first one is the forecast, our consumption forecast. How accurate is it? We almost know for certain, almost 100%, that whatever that is we forecasted is not going to be the correct forecast. We'll have something very different. Not very different, hopefully it will be within 1%. So how much that that is going to change our cost. That's still yet to be seen. The most important factor here, because we just started operation and we don't know what the opt-outs look like, we estimated the opt-outs to be 4% on the commercial, 8% on the residential. Right now, if it stays the way it is, we may be under 2%. So that means we need to go out and start buying some more energy that will cost more money. So that gives a little bit of uncertainty to our cost. Changes in the spot market price also can make a change in the cost. On an hourly basis, even though we locked a certain amount of energy from the suppliers, we know on an hourly basis we're going to be either higher or lower from whatever that is that we bought and locked the prices for. And whether if we're higher, then we need to buy from the ISO. If we're lower, we're going to be selling to the ISO, and the spot market prices can change eventually our forecast of costs. Regulatory mandates is another one. How they would want to phase in, go into 50% renewable. We're still not solid about how that's going to take place. So these mandates could tweak the picture a little bit for over the next 5 years or 6 years, and that's something we have to account for. On the operational revenue, we have just one big giant issue, and you're all by now very familiar with, and that's the PCIA, the charges that PG&E adjusts every year, and we don't know what the PCIA for the new ones is. Power charge indifference adjustment. It's basically what PG&E every year comes in to say, you need to make my customers whole, and therefore I'm going to take from you the difference between what I bought on your behalf when I thought that you're going to be my customer and the spot market price that I'm going to have to sell that resource to, and the difference between the two is the adjustment. That can change a great deal. We know, for example, in January 2016, it went up by nearly 100%, a full penny per kilowatt hour. And just so you'll see how this picture looked like, a single penny of reduction in our revenue. If we have to reduce our rates by 1 penny per kilowatt hour, that means $36 million will be taken straight out of our books. So that is the one single issue that we know on the revenue side that is huge uncertainty and we have to account for. So we looked at 4 future scenarios just to see what the balance is going to be between our supply and demand. The first one we call the base case, which you've seen it already a number of times in our pro forma in the past, and that, as you can see, if we stay at 1% below PG&E for the next 6 years, we will be having quite a bit of surplus. So needless to say, we're not going to stay at 1% below PG&E. If the base case scenario materializes, then comes 2019, we're definitely going to have to do something to account for the fact that our rates need to be dropped from well below PG&E and not just 1%. We looked at a best case scenario, and a best case scenario in this case basically say that the supply cost prices will actually rise. And the supply cost prices rise, you would think that this is not a good case, but really when that happens, the PCIA or the charges that PG&E hits us with will drop. And so we assume that there will be an increase of 5% every year over the next 6 years of supply costs. And because our cost is set already for the next couple of years, then after that is set for a portion of, we figure we're going to be at the same level for the next couple of years, then it's going to go up by 2%, then 3%, then full 5% after 2020. And correspondingly, we figured that the prices for the PCIA is going to start to drop every year to correspond to that increase in supply prices. And we looked at the picture one more time, and as you can see, in this case, in the best case scenario, the surplus even jumps from over the 5-year period or 6-year period. It jumps from 357 million to 385 million. And then we looked at the a couple of other cases. One I like to call regulatory bias, which basically the supply price will stay the same, but the PCIA is going to keep going up. And in this case, I'm pushing it up by, was it 5%? 10%. 10%. I'm pushing the PCIA up by 10% because PG&E always find ways to, to kind of push that number up every time we turn around. And in that case, you can see now that the surplus is going to go up the first year, then it begins to drop steadily after that. The worst case scenario that I have here is basically saying that the cost of energy is going to keep dropping. And when the cost of energy keep dropping, even though our cost drops a little, but now the PCIA goes up tremendously, and in this case, we're pushing it up by 20% every year. And as you can see, it's the first case where we can see negative, it doesn't become surplus anymore. We see deficits coming in 21 and 22. In general, even in that case that we call the worst case, we'll still, over the 6-year period, we'll still end up with a surplus. Now, after attending the in-bank last week, I'm not too sure this is the worst case scenario. From what I'm hearing now, Southern California Edison and PG&E is floating new ideas as to how to calculate the PCIA. It will be an uphill battle for them to be able to get that new approach to pencil in, because they have to go through a lot of headaches to make it happen. But if they do make it happen, then this will not be the worst case scenario. Okay, so what is it that we are concluding? We are doing well, so that's the first point. Looks like definitely for the first couple of years, we're going to be doing fairly good business. We will have surplus that we can use. Comes 2019, and under base case scenario, we're going to need to readdress what our rates should be, and we need to have to come back here and begin to decide on the rates based on the cost of service rather than the way we've done it today. And also, we concluding that perhaps it's best for us for the next couple of years to just hold our rates steady, just like we agreed to, at 1% below PG&E. Don't change them next year either. And whatever surplus that we manage to accumulate over the 2 years, we'll use it in order to pay back the cities, in order to retire the line of credit completely. And we'll end up still with quite a bit of money that we can use to enhance our credit. It will allow us then to go out and lock in contracts for a period of time that will exceed what we are doing now, which is the 5-year period. That is the conclusion we're coming to, and certainly we're not, this is for discussion, so we can discuss it tonight, and then we can bring something for approval next month that will incorporate any ideas that you folks share with us tonight.
Thank you. Any questions? Director Corrigan.
Thank you for this. So this PCIA, I guess my concern is when I look at it, how confident are you that PG&E will not use sort of an arbitrary PCIA number and jack up the rates again immediately? Not this 10% model doesn't take into account what you started the conversation with, saying that the last year alone they did a 100% increase. So are we protected in the event, or do we have a remedy in the event that they do? And can we respond quickly enough to make sure we don't end up in financial hot water?
PG&E can only change the PCIA once a year. And they can't do anything arbitrary. They have actually a formula that is set, and they have to show the cost of their contracts relative to market prices. And the market prices is calculated based on a specific formula, a defined formula. And some of the contract prices are not shown to us immediately. We are fighting now very hard to make sure that we have access to all of the information that they have that eventually end up going into the black box, and out of it comes the PCIA. We have, I believe, managed to succeed at least to convince the CPUC. At this point, we can actually have a consultant that go out there and review those numbers and make sure that they are correct. There's a push to actually have professional from the organization, whether they're consultant or staff, that will actually follow and look at these numbers carefully to make sure that the PG&E is not doing something arbitrarily strange. I see it's going to be very difficult for them to push the PCIA to a point where it becomes 50% of our cost. They're going to, and right now we are engaging with them in a workshop to try to find ways out of this. And one of the ways that we are recommending and suggesting that we are approaching the CPUC with is a buyout. It's just basically to say, look at all the bump contracts that you got, for the lack of a better expression, and we'll look at that, looking into the future, calculate the total cost of these bad contracts that you got. Then we'll buy ourselves out of them completely, and we don't have to deal with you on a year-by-year basis anymore and deal with these ups and downs of your numbers. And if we do that, then we can always go borrow that money, pay it over a long period of time, and we have definitely some certainty as to what these exit charges are. So that's one option that we're looking into. We're looking at a few other options to deal with this runaway PCIA numbers.
Thank
Okay.
you.
Director Miller?
Just following on, just PG&E's under no obligation to optimize their power procurement model to keep the PCIA from going out of whack.
That's correct. I'm not too sure they have an incentive to work contracts in any way or shape that will be optimal for anybody, because they don't realize any profit on this business, and so they do whatever they need to do in order just to keep the peace with the regulatory agencies and not be in hot water with any of them.
So do you think that we're going to get positive situation with the PCIA with PG&E, or do you think it's going to end up having to be a legislative push?
It is my experience that when you are in conflict with the investor-owned utilities, having worked for municipal utilities all of my life, that it usually takes somewhere between 7 to 10 years of the munis giving up on being able to reach a settlement with PG&E on specific issues. They reach settlement on a lot of issues, but there are certain issues that are big enough that you can't reach settlement with PG&E or on, and then you have to go to the legislators and work it out there.
Okay, Director Sinks, I think you were next.
So just so everybody's clear, PCIA and other what are called non-bypassable charges are things that are set by the CPUC by formula or otherwise, right? So it's not PG&E simply declaring what it's going to be. That's the first thing. There is some encouraging news. We have a couple of appointees from Governor Brown's office who are big climate change mitigation advocates, and they seem to be more sympathetic, or so we're helpful. But I do believe, and we, as I've reported here in prior meetings, we have been spending time talking to our legislators, and they're on board with this. I think as we develop clout in the Bay Area and in Southern California, in communities that are adopting this model, I think our legislators will listen, and we are going to, though, have to tell the story. So, for example, the sorts of things we heard at the en banc hearing were, well, you're not creating any new renewables. This is all stuff that's already floating out there, and you're just cherry picking. And so we have to be able to tell a compelling story. And Marin, for example, has turned a brownfield site in the East Bay into a big solar field next to the Richmond refinery. And so, but for that purpose, and because of this, we have explicitly joined an organization called CalCCA, an advocacy organization, members from each of community choice energy agencies. And as you know, if you're looking at the packet, we are bringing on a regulatory affairs person And we, I think, as board members, will need to be in good communication with our legislators to see what remedies may be necessary in Sacramento if we don't feel like San Francisco is treating us fairly, and more specifically, our ratepayers fairly. Thanks.
Director Gibbons, please.
There we go. So along with what Director Singh said, there is the organization that's being established, which is the Clean Energy Council or something, which is a collection of clean energy JPAs to establish a common position and ability to negotiate some of these difficult issues. So that's in the works as we speak, that organization.
Yeah, if you refer to CalCCA, that's already formed. We have now up to 8 members. 5 of them are already in operation and their customers are phased in. 3 will be in April and May. That's us, Apple Valley, and Humboldt County. All 3 of us are coming in April and May. There's a lineup. We have about 5 affiliate members that are studying and have invested now into forming their own CCAs. And we're just growing very fast. I mean, the organization just formed about maybe 3-4 months ago. And so far it's been quite effective in telling our stories as Director Singh's have just mentioned.
And
Just have the first board.
yes, and then, and just to clarify, make sure I'm right, the PCIA's, this delta number of having to buy PG&E out of what they had to pre-buy, just like we're buying out 4 or 5 years, they had to buy out 4 or 5 years. And now that they no longer have to provide the customer with that, they've got excess power that they paid, whatever they paid for. So the PCIA is to help them recover from that investment commitment. Okay, so is it more or less a 5-year scenario, or is it longer than that?
It's as long as whatever the contracts that they've signed is. So if they sign a contract for 20 years, it just goes on for 20 years. And keep in mind, it's a delta. So if it happens like for year 15, that the contract price is lower than the market, we get the benefit of that.
Right.
But hasn't happened yet.
Yeah, I wasn't thinking that they had bought them that far out. Okay, thank you for that.
Sure.
Any other comments, questions?
Yeah.
Director Bruins?
Can I get clarification in terms of the financial analysis that you have on here? It says under the base case scenario, we had a projected cumulative operating surplus at the end of 2018 of $88.5 million. And then it shows repayment of the initial contributions of the member cities, funding of working capital reserves. Where's the payback of the line of credit, retiring the line of credit?
When we put this together, we didn't know we were going to have the CPUC deposit we were going to take. We would try to make it to May without touching the line of credit. But having said that, we're going to draw on that line of credit, and that is not included in this number, but certainly we will.
Okay, because I think what threw me off is I thought we had all said that, repaying to the cities was subordinate to the bank loan, so I didn't see that showing up here.
But if you would allow me, the line of credit is just a line of credit. Whether we use it or not, most likely we're not going to use it on except just to kind of deal with a cash flow issue. So it's not an actual money that we borrowed that we're going to turn around and give back. It's just an amount of money that the bank make available for us to tap into if we need to.
For cash flow.
Yes, to deal with cash flow issues.
Not a term loan.
Yes.
Okay, yeah, I confused myself because of that subordinate, that we were saying our repayment to the cities was subordinate to the bank loan.
Yeah,
that's
and
why I was-
it's to retiring the line of credit. First,
Okay.
we have to retire the line of credit, then we pay the cities.
Okay.
Okay, any other questions? Let me open it up, public comment. Bruce Carney, come forward, please.
Hi, thanks for the chance to speak to you again. So James Talea and I have an odd hobby. We go to PCIA workshops together. And we went up to San Rafael today, and we sat through another one of these mind-numbing meetings between investor-owned utilities, public interest groups, and CCAs. When these series of meetings started about 5 months ago, I think there was a lot of hope in the room that some grand new idea would be brought forth that would create transparency, perhaps even reduction to the PCIA that everyone could agree to in a sort of kumbaya spirit. That didn't happen. There are modest improvements in transparency and the similarity of how various utilities will present their numbers. But the big issue is still on the table, and I think it was Chair Rennie who alluded to the fact that PG&E, to pick our favorite local investor-owned utility, doesn't really have in its best interest to procure in a way that reduces future PCIAs. We're sort of in the situation where PG&E, has invited us all over to dinner and isn't sure whether we're bringing dishes of our own, so they're going to have to prepare all the food that would possibly be needed if we didn't, but we are bringing dishes of our own. What was missing from the meeting today, in my opinion, was someone who had an architectural perspective as opposed to an accounting or engineering perspective. There's a lot of detail orientation and no big vision. I suspect that the big vision will have to come from the legislature ultimately. And the good news is that once San Jose and Los Angeles and a few other places launch their CCAs, more than half the Senate districts in California will have a CCA in the Senate district. So certainly, as Mr. Sinks said, we have friends in high places, and the Senate in Sacramento is the place that I expect leadership to eventually come from. But I'm not sure who the leader will be. I hope that someone can help figure out how we will change the entire procurement strategy from a very competitive, I'm holding my cards at the vest and so you can't see them, that may lead to vast over contracting. And by the way, some of these contracts not only run for 20 years, they run for 30 years for new power plants that were authorized a few years back and are just now coming online. So I don't think the buyout idea is likely to gain traction anytime soon, although I realize it's a very attractive sort of intermediate term solution. I think the bigger solution is yet to be developed. And I do believe that the fundamental concept of indifference, that the bundled customers who stay with the IOU versus those who come to a CCA, is a bedrock. And so there will be charges that have to be flowed back and forth between load-serving entities. But if we can not over-procure, then those charges should be affordable, and eventually they do diminish. Thanks.
Okay. Thank you. Any other members of the public wish to speak to us? Seeing nobody else coming forward, I'll close the public testimony. Any more questions, comments from the board? No? Okay, so I will close this item and move on to item 11, Silicon Valley Clean Energy website update. I assume we're going to have Pamela Leonard.
Hi, good evening, Chair and Board. I am Pamela Leonard, your Community Outreach Specialist for Silicon Valley Clean Energy. I'm joined by Joyce Vollmer with MIG. She's part of one of our consultants who has built and developed our website. And before I get started, I just wanted to point out, if it's okay to do so at this time, that we have provided you with swag bags at your seats. And so I just wanted to let you know that we have those available now, and Paige in the back has some other goodies if any members of the public would like some swag. Yes. So to dive into our new website, which launched on January 23rd to coincide with the date that our notifications were first dropped in the mail for the first batch of customers. We needed our new website because up until now, the previous website was focused as being a tool to educate the public about community choice energy programs and the partnership that was in place before the formation of the authority. And the site now really highlights customer choice and the programs that we're offering. And we also really wanted to tell our story in a way that would help customers to quickly understand what it is we're doing, how it works, and to understand the benefits that we're providing their community. And the site also has the transactional capabilities to upgrade service to Green Prime, or early enroll with Green Prime, as well as to opt out. So the design of the site the goals here were to really enforce our brand. I think I realized it just wasn't up. Okay, I forgot to ask. It's also a mobile-friendly design. So part of the expertise from working with MIG is increasingly we're seeing website traffic coming from mobile devices. So we wanted to be able to address that. And the clean design and organization of this site is really to allow customers to just easily find and get to the information that they need. Yes. And I don't know what's going on with the, okay. Interesting. Okay. So here's just a quick peek at the mobile responsive design. You can see how the...
So just a comment for all of you who are visitors. These are touch screens, so if you put your finger on the screen, you'll make a mark, and I can remove it by touching the bottom left corner.
Hey, guys.
That's what's happening.
Oh, okay.
So somebody is really... No, they're engaged.
Great.
So thank you for that.
We encourage you to play around, and I'm just really kind of highlighting some of the features that we want to point out on the site for all of you as you speak with constituents and let them know of places that you can send them on the site. I'm not going to go page by page, and I do encourage you to explore on your own. So first, kind of in order of the tabs that are featured on the top right of the site, is about SVCE. This is really just about what we do as an agency, the how it works, the benefits of what we're doing. And then the next is your choices, where we describe our offerings, starting with Green Start and Green Prime, as well as showing the difference in the carbon-free and renewable content with the choice to opt out, which of course we support choice all around. We also have our NEM, our Solar Net Energy Metering program, is also featured on this page. And by clicking any of these options, you are taken to some of the transactional or further details about each of these programs. So for example, to upgrade or enroll early with Green Prime, which you all have the option to do, and thank you to those of you who have done so already. This is what that page looks like, and this, again, just kind of the option here about how you are able to enroll early with this if you are looking forward to starting your service earlier than your other determined enrollment date. And just kind of to take you through what this process looks like, a customer will enter their PG&E account information, which takes you to this page, and for commercial accounts, for example, that may have multiple accounts associated with them, you can select the properties that apply to you that you would like to take an action on with your service. So you would select your account, and then enter information that is requested, and from there, you get a pop-up of our terms and conditions, which you have to confirm that you have read word for word, as everybody does with terms and conditions. And then from there, you receive your enrollment confirmation number, which on the previous frame, if you can elect how you would like to receive your confirmation by mail or by email, or just I'll write it down because you provided it for me. So the opt-out process works very similarly to this. And so we have that option available. And both of these options are also available through our call center, through the IVR. It can also be done by phone. And another key feature as we get to the rates and billing section of the site is a cost comparison, which I have found to be a very effective tool in outreach. This really provides that side-by-side example, and we saw this at our last meeting when we were discussing rates of what it costs a typical residential user, and we also have a similar chart available for commercial users. You can see the side-by-side comparison there. We also, from these rates pages, is where we link to PDFs that do provide the full detailed information of what all of the rates that carry over from PG&E are with SVCE. We also have a sample bill on Understanding Your Page where we're highlighting the key features of your bill, really starting from like the first item is this is your account number and this is what you need in order to take action with your service with us, whether that's upgrading or opting out, as well as highlighting what the additional line item will be with SVCE's generation charges as they would appear on your bill. And then the section of the website where we feature information about SVCE's governance and staff and other resources is called Inside SVCE, and it's located in the footer of the website along with contact information and highlighting our areas of service. And when you go here, it takes you into a microsite where we have all the information about the agency part is really about our history and our board of directors meetings. All of that information is posted here in addition to meeting our board and our staff and other resources such as our video that is currently in the process of being updated, as well as our governing documents and other resources there. And it also has a link to our FAQ. So our FAQ is quite robust at this early stage in our existence. So we have it broken down by tab and category so people can easily navigate what their question may be. And we're always able to update this at any time, adding questions as we learn we need to, as we gain feedback from the community. And as we grow and establish more of a presence, we can slim this down at some point. I also wanted to point out, thank you, that from the home page on the top left, we do have a lot of the pages translated in Chinese and Spanish. And the other languages will be provided by Google Translate, and that's also something that's still in development and will be added. Oh, it is added? Oh, sorry. It is added. It is just not on the screenshots I provided on the slides. So we have those available, and those go fully for Chinese and Spanish. Those in-language microsites go all the way through the opt-out or upgrade process. So visit us and play around. And happy to answer any questions or, yeah.
Director Miller.
I sent some feedback earlier, minor technical details. It's the QA person in me, sorry. Though I will test the whole website if you want me to do it. Just on the opt-out pie chart, I think we made sort of a conceptual mistake because we used the exact same colors as we do for ours. So we use sort of the dark teal, if I may, for renewable, and the light teal was sort of the carbon-free, non-renewable. But then when you get down to PG&E, you've got the dark teal for their renewable, but I think that we should break up the light teal. You should have, for example, a 20% slice of a neon teal to represent their radioactive, and maybe
Red.
I mean, they're nuclear. I'm sorry, I said it wrong. And maybe a brown section to represent theirs that we know that comes from carbon sources. So that particular pie chart might have 4 colors in it, 2 of which might be somewhat less pleasing than our greenhouse gas-free and 100% renewable. Because I think people are very visual when they see these things. When you get to that one, you're going to be like, what's this weird blue? Oh, that's nuclear power. Well, I guess that's carbon-free. And what's this brown? Oh, that must be the carbon stuff. So, and there won't be any coal black because PG&E doesn't do that. But I think that might help that particular visual. And I did spend a lot of time on the website trying all the different options. I never hit the final opt-out button, but I did look at all those sorts of things. The website is pretty clean. It works very well. I was generally pleased with it, especially since it was sort of a first run. So it was great to see very functional data, to see my name pop up right away from my bill. I couldn't be happier.
Director Corrigan?
I'll just tag on to that. When you look at the pie chart for PG&E, in addition to adding the colors, it would be, at least in my preliminary glance at it, it would make more sense if 60% carbon-free is one of the obvious totals that you can add from the pie chart. Right now, you're like, well, 30 and 70 is 100%, but what part of that is 60%, where the other ones are cut up and kind of cut and dry. Do you see what I'm saying? The one above it's 100%, and it's two halves, 50/50. The next one's 100%, but it's the whole circle. This one, it would make more sense if it was 60%, and it was obvious what 60% was and what the other 40 was.
Director Smith?
If, say, somebody makes a mistake and opts out, what does it look like for them to re-engage? Is that possible? How do they do that?
That's a good question. I would suggest they call our customer service center and probably speak to a representative, because we don't have a re-opt-in page unless it's a customer. Okay, I guess I should back up. You're eligible to opt out once your account has been identified as eligible for enrollment in one of our phases. So you are only eligible to opt out if your account is, let's say, going in April. Because if you're going in July and you try to opt out now, it's not going to work because you're not technically identified yet as CCA eligible, is the way that the coding has kind of been provided as PG&E provides this data to us as we transition customers. So a customer could not accidentally opt out early, but should they do so, they are welcome back at any time within the 60-day pre- and post-enrollment period. But like I said, I would have to look at that functionality to see how that would work should they go to the upgrade page. Perhaps, I mean, we would just need to look into that to see what would happen because we don't have that as
This poor smart rate guy who made the mistake and opted out, he's home right now trying to figure out how to opt back in.
Yeah, so outside of calling our customer service, I'll have to look at seeing if there's a way to do that without speaking to a representative.
What city is he in?
Okay, Director Gibbons, you had?
I do. So I'm not sure if others agree with me, and I may be too literal on this, but I've looked at it on the phone and on the webpage, and when you look at the graphic with the two teals in it, and it goes from the light teal and the circles around to the 50%, there's nothing that tells you that. I think what you're trying to say is the light teal is carbon-free. There's nothing that communicates the carbon-free in the image. And
yeah,
it's 100%.
I know the words say it, but the graphic doesn't. Okay, so, and then,
That's why I was thinking anything blue was carbon-free. That's why you needed nuclear blue for nuclear power.
yeah. Yeah. I've been trying not to touch it anymore. But I have to say, I think it's confusing. You're defining renewable, but one of our major successes, in my opinion, is the 100% greenhouse gas free, carbon neutral, carbon free. And the graphic doesn't describe that.
okay. We'll take a look at that. I know we've been playing around with a lot of different options for this. Currently we have the description of that in the words, but I understand
Yeah.
a lot of people don't read the words, right? They
No,
just wanna
it's,
glance at
and I'm going to be on a bit of a pain on this too, because when people get older, they can't read as well. And I know the new design trends and the new font trends and all of that is to use light fonts and thin fonts. And you really need to be aware of the age group that's going to be looking at this too. Yeah, don't be so stylized that people can't read it, okay? And the only thing I can think of for the colors that might work is the checkerboard pattern. I don't think it will, but maybe it will. You know what I mean? So the first color is one color, and then you get a checkerboard pattern, so you read through that's 100%, something like that. But at the very least, you need the words. At the very least, I think you need the words. My personal comments.
I think Director Sinks was next in line.
Yeah, I know. I mean, I don't want to try to redesign your website and graphics here, but I appreciate the comment that says somehow graphically we ought to really emphasize that we're taking, even at the base rate, a matrix which is what, 60% carbon-free to 100% carbon-free. I think that's really relevant, and it sells our story. And yes, there's the nuance of the message about renewables, but I think the board here has been, and staff actually, has been very focused on ensuring that we talk about our first priority, which is to be carbon-free. I will tell you, as I mentioned earlier, I enrolled. I found it so simple. It just worked. I got the email. I assume it was automated, the email I got back confirming my enrollment with the number. So all I needed was my PG&E bill number and my last name and my zip code. And it did the confirmation check and said, okay, you're eligible. I wasn't eligible for, I've not yet gotten a notice, so I just opted for Green Prime. And it let me do that and confirmed that I was eligible to do that, and I got my notice. So I found the user interface simple, effective. I mean, I was able to put these details in from immediately after clicking, okay, I want to do this, I entered the details, I clicked again, and that was, please confirm, and that was it. It was actually very elegant and simple. So I appreciate that about websites, compared to websites that, where you might have to click through 10 or 12 times to try to affect some action. So thank you.
Vice Chair Harney?
Yes, thank you. I think the website is excellent, and I don't really think we need to redesign it. My comment earlier to CEO Habashi was related to the primary landing page that says only 20% of the residential customers will begin service in April. And what you just stated was if you're not in that first enrollment phase, you can't opt out. And that is causing a lot of confusion with my, with my community. 80% of the people that receive those postcards cannot opt out if they wanted to, right? At this point in time.
No. Everybody that received the postcard can opt out if they want.
Because they're the 20%.
They're phase one.
Okay, thank you for the clarification. So my challenge is now that there's a lot of information and sharing of this initiative on different social media outlets, and it's becoming challenging to answer those questions because those people that did not receive the postcard, try and follow me here, I'm going to have a hard time myself, but those who did not receive the postcard but are on social media hearing about Silicon Valley Clean Energy and the fact that you're automatically opted in, and to opt out, you have to go to the website. There's no clear direction here on how to do that, when to do that. And so some people in my community are saying, you didn't ask us if we wanted to be opted in, and now you're telling us we can opt out, but not until we get the postcard, and we want to opt out immediately. So it's kind of tricky, I know, but it would be nice if in the opt-out area, there was a little bit of that communication that you may only opt out once you're in your enrollment phase or
Receive your postcard.
receive your postcard, yeah.
So to that point, we did add that language to the opt-out page on the website, but to your point, that is not right on the homepage where people who are determined to opt out probably want to see it front and center. So we'll look into.
Yeah, sorry, not to interrupt you, but I wouldn't put it on the landing page on the homepage. I would keep it on the opt-out page.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
So we want to be sensitive to the ease of opting out for those who do want to do it, and so that's why we don't have a full description of what that means on the homepage, but we do show the option there. So we did think about this a lot, and the information about once you receive a postcard, that's when you're eligible. That should be on the opt-out page.
Okay.
It is there, but you might want to make it a little bit bigger.
Sure.
Because it's almost next to the last sentence. So,
One thing that's kind of missing in the opt-out thing, and my community and your community are different, but one of the big messages I've had to send out on social media in my community is that it's an opt-out program, and I had no say in that, and we had no say in it. That's the state law. And so I put it out that way. This is the state law. Sorry about that. But what a great program we have. Because the first thing they want to do is blame government. And as soon as I say, look, it wasn't me, it was somebody else, those who were mad at me saying they were going to opt out are now saying, okay, we won't. We'll stay, because it wasn't your fault that this happened this way. So you got to, the website doesn't say anything about that, but I find that as a useful tool in my community and explaining it's not us here who decided it's an opt-out only program.
Okay, any other questions? Director Bruins?
You're on.
Okay, couple of items. One is, I think the website, fabulous job, okay? But I do have one question. In terms of the opt-out pie chart, is there any reason why it's labeled opt-out, and then definitely in the finer print underneath it, it says PG&E, that we did not call that in a larger font PG&E? And the reason I'm asking that is because we do have, there are electricity customers who remember there was the program where you could get it from another supplier that was greener than PG&E, who are on that program. And so when they opt out, this really, they're staying, I assume they're staying with who is supplying their energy now, which this pie chart is not them. So I'm just wondering, and again, I don't know how many people, I don't know how long that program was available or anything like that, but I just was curious as to, might we consider putting the opt-out, it's like opt-out of PG&E? Because most of the people who are using somebody else, they know it's somebody else who's supplying the electricity. Anyway, that was just food for thought. The other question is, as an agency, do we have the ability to use the Nextdoor social media?
Yes, this is a very interesting point that we have been looking at the last couple of weeks since the conversations have started on Nextdoor. And interestingly enough, our organization, our agency as a JPA is not recognized as eligible for a public agency account on Nextdoor. They only provide them to cities and towns and counties. So if we were serving all of Santa Clara County, I think, like the water district has an account, for example. So we are relying heavily on working with your staff at each of the cities to utilize your existing Nextdoor accounts, and I've been in the process of drafting some information for all of our representatives to help perhaps be on the lookout for some Nextdoor comments. I know that, so Bruce and James have been really helpful with helping to monitor some of the conversations on Nextdoor, because we're not able to see anything outside of the neighborhood that we live in, like, for my personal account.
Yeah, I'd say, let me do the shout out. Because James is in my Nextdoor circle, even though I'm in Los Altos and such. And, he has actually done an exceptional job. And I also would do a shout out. And I'm sure Bruce is probably doing the same thing in his Nextdoor group, but I'm not part of that circle. And the other shout out I want to do is actually to Sunnyvale mayor, because Glenn Hendricks is also part of our circle. And my favorite line in what he put in there, when somebody says, I went home, had this postcard in my mailbox, and I'm wondering about this, with the one that started the thread. Glenn Hendricks went in there, and his line in there, which I thought was wonderful, he goes, I hope when I get home I have the postcard in my mailbox, which I thought was fabulous, and particularly when he identified himself as the mayor of Sunnyvale. But I would encourage us to try and figure out how to get your network of the public information people in each of the cities, because if something goes out from them, they can then easily take that and shoot the stuff over to you. They can also see where, where some of us are lucky enough to have like a James or a Bruce who can chime in there with very accurate information. then I feel sorry for everybody else who doesn't have the Bruce and the James out there. But I would encourage us to maybe see if we can accelerate that a little bit and get something out there, and particularly in terms of really expressing to people, that 20% have gotten, are getting this, and the rest of you will roll out. I mean, something that kind of helps, because you're getting people who have the postcard, and you have everybody else, the other 80% that doesn't have a postcard and doesn't know really what the heck you're talking about yet. But again, I think the website is fabulous. In terms of the conversations, I kind of agree if we could do something with that PG&E, again, because it's a value system, right? It's what you're really looking for. So that would be the only one of all I heard that I would say, oh, that kind of resonated with me. But good job, guys. Excellent.
So Director Gibbons, I think you're up next.
Okay. I haven't tried it out, so I'm only reacting to what I'm seeing tonight. But in terms of Nextdoor, although they're not part of our JPA in Palo Alto's a newly elected council member is a senior person in Nextdoor, and I'm sure that they could be reached out to see if there's a way to help get our organization qualified, because so many other organizations are that cross boundaries and are partial this is and partial that's. So I'm sure you might get some traction with that.
Director Sinks?
Yeah, I wondered, since there will be some confusion about who's in first and what's the algorithm and how come they did and I didn't. I believe we have a policy in each city of starting at the north end of the city and working our way south through these phases.
South to north.
It's south to north?
Yes.
Okay. Would it make any sense at all to attempt to map across the region? Just explain this is how, we had to find some method. This is the algorithm, and so if your neighbors to the south got a postcard and you didn't, don't worry. Or, even post a little map up with a graphic. Is that possible, easy, or is that just too much?
We can look into that, and I just want to add that with Nextdoor, we realized that having the neighborhood groupings the way that we did for enrollment is actually working in our favor in this occasion, specifically with Nextdoor, because we are able to say, we are able to target neighborhood outreach that way, as opposed to if we had just kind of took a random approach to it. But yeah, for the communities that neighbor each other, where maybe the south part of one community is touches the central part of another, that is where we're starting to see the need for some clarification.
It might just help, right, to explain to people that we've had to phase this just because there's work to do here, and here's our algorithm, and we're going to get to you, don't worry, and you'll have a chance.
Yeah, we'll look into options for that.
Just a suggestion. Thank you.
Director Gibbons?
If I may, the idea of having each city post something, if there could be a generic email that says, some of the members of your X, Y, and Z city will be receiving postcards. And these postcards indicate that you're going to be enrolled in, and it is a phased rollout, and, that kind of thing. If there could be a simple little email that can be sent by the cities that just explains it's starting. I didn't know we were doing south to north, and I don't know where my city fits in the April, July, and October schedule. I think we'd all benefit from knowing that. Is that what we decided, 20% of all cities across the board?
20%. They just started from the south side of your city.
Okay, so that's fine, I didn't know that. So it'd be good if that's the case in every city, then we should have just a generic notice going out on Nextdoor, and that'll shortcut a lot of the conversation, the misinformation.
Okay. Let me go to public testimony at this point. Is there any members of the public wish to address us? Please come forward and remind me of your name, please.
Steve Schmidt from Los Altos Hills. There was a slight gap in the scintillating conversation, and I just upgraded to Green Prime. It was incredibly easy.
Bravo.
Yeah. James Talea?
Hi, James Talea. So I've been working a bit with Pamela to see how we in the community can help overlay, and particularly with Nextdoor. So it seems that it would work well with the public agency connections, as well as each of you and all the alternates to be layers in coverage, and then in the community for us as we can to cover areas. And so we've started within the carbon-free Mountain View / carbon-free Silicon Valley to identify where everybody is in what neighborhoods. And I even got a blown-up map now of the whole territory, and I'm starting to draw circles and see where we have coverage so we can find the gaps. I'm also involved in Sunnyvale Cool, so I'll be reaching out to them for some help, as well as 350 Silicon Valley to try to reach some other coverage areas for community members to help the start of a community ambassador assistance. And I envision I'll probably have to do a little training for some of them that don't know much about it yet, but we're getting there. Thanks.
Thank you. Any other members of the public wish to address us? Okay, I'll close the public testimony. Is there any other comments from the board? Questions? All right. Jeannie, you're looking like yes.
This is just general comments?
Let me
Or on this
close. Let me
item?
close this item first. So we'll close item number. So before we close it, Ms. Leonard. So you've gotten lots of input. Any comments? You're going to go back and evaluate incorporating it and.
Yes, it's great that we had Joyce join us here, who can help us sort of look at the design of, in particular, the opt-out pie chart. And we'll take note of other suggestions and continue working with city staff in getting our messaging out about the enrollment process. Yes.
Okay, thank you. So I'll close number 11, which brings us to our final item, which is board member announcements and direction for future agenda items. I'll start off by saying last night Los Gatos voted to move up to Green Prime.
Thank you.
So is that eight of 12 now, I think we're at?
I believe we're up to 7. I don't think we got number 8 yet.
Okay. Other comments?
Yep.
Director Bruins?
I was just going to announce for anybody who might be listening, in Los Altos, we have 2 public meetings going on for clean energy. One is on March 1st at our Grant Park facility, and the other one is on March 15th, and that's hosted by our city, with obviously clean energy staff there. And then we also have one on March 15th that is hosted by our Greentown Los Altos, and that's going to be in our main library off of San Antonio.
Director Gibbons?
And I think the Mercury News is looking to do a feature article on clean energy, so we'll all be looking to see that at some point, hopefully in the near future.
I can say that I will be talking to Monte Vista and Cupertino High students in our city, their AP environmental science classes, and at a couple of San Jose State classes in the next month about our programming.
Any other comments? Okay. Anything final from staff?
No, thank you, Mr. Chairman. So that's
all right. Well, then with that, we'll be adjourned.